Hi, everybody. Welcome to Women and Children First. I hope you can hear me because right now Yvonne can't hear me. But she's watching along and we'll be able to hear her read. I'm going to start our evening tonight, our reading tonight, with a land acknowledgement. Did I say my name is Linda? My name's Linda. Hi, everybody. Um, we begin our virtual events as we begin all our events in the store with a land acknowledgement. Please join me in acknowledging that the land on which the bookstore stands is the occupied, unceded territory of the Potawatomi, Peoria, Miami, and Sioux people. We encourage you to learn more about land acknowledgements and about the rightful owners of the land where you are viewing this video. Yvonne Zipter and I have known each other 40 years. We were just, baby dykes, excited about the bookstore opening and our ability to reach out and find new people who are excited about literature. And Yvonne and I and 5 or 6 other people started a wonderful poetry workshop. And that's when I was first introduced to Yvonne's poetry. And I've been reading it ever since, 40 years. And I tell you, her voice has grown, her range of interests has just widened so beautifully. I mean, she always wrote wonderfully about the natural world. But now she writes from, 30 years of a wonderful long-term relationship, of 20 years of racing greyhounds, which is the title of her new book, Kissing the Long Face of the Greyhound. I love this book. I have spent a lot of time with it in the last month, and there are poems that take me to some dark places, and there are poems that just bring me joy. I will say that Yvonne's curiosity about the world is such a wonderful gift, and her ability to answer the questions where her curiosity leads, to speculate about how the natural world and our own selves and soul are connected, the way our consciousness merges with the creatures we care for, and the way our consciousness can merge with another's. It has not been a straightforward climb for either of us. The bookstore has certainly gone through its ups and downs. My poetry has taken a very, very back seat. What's really beautiful is that Yvonne, while holding down a day job for many years, also turned in regular columns for the Windy City Times, continued to write her poetry, wrote 2 books of nonfiction, published a beautiful collection of poems called The Patience of Metal, and now has this wonderful new book called Kissing the Long Face, the Greyhound. I'm privileged to be a part of a small group of people who gets to read Yvonne's poems when they're hot off of her imagination. And she welcomes criticism the way most poets could not be that, that care that much about their work that they can divorce their ego from it and ask you, is this any good? Does this speak to you? And listen to criticism and respond to it. She's really just a marvelous person. And then in her retirement, she's come up with all these great ideas, like the poetry machines, which she stocks with these little plastic balls that each contain a poem. And she has 2 of these machines, one here at the bookstore and one at a bar or a general store, I forget. But she uses the money, considerable money that people put into the machines, with the delight of getting a fresh poem. And that goes to after school programs and literacy programs, and is just yet one more way that she gives back to the community. This new book is a work of a very mature sensibility, a seasoned poet, and an ever curious youthful mind. It's a delight, and I know you'll all love it. So I'm going to turn this over to Yvonne. She can't hear me, so it'll be a little bit of a surprise, but I'm going to give her the thumbs up to get going.
Thank you, Linda. I could not hear because of technical difficulties what Linda was saying. But I want to thank Women and Children First for hosting this event, and I want to thank Linda for what I am sure was a lovely introduction. I will listen to it later. And I want to thank all of you for being here. Like much of many things that have been planned, this was not my plan for my launch party. I had hoped to be able to do this in person, of course, and maybe drink some champagne and share some cake with all of you, and be able to see you when I was reading. But the good news is that people who couldn't otherwise have been at the reading, from Oregon to New York and Florida and all over the country, are able to be here, who wouldn't have been able to be here for the reading otherwise. So it's still a celebration, and I wanted to start off with a celebratory poem. This was written for my nephew Miles and my niece Kate, and it's called Exaltation. When the universe, like a smitten lover, surprises me with its generosity, its play of ordinary against radiance, the quick of me ignites like a wick, a sizzle of light and heat in the hurricane lamp of my body. In the apple snap of a November night, I stand with the children in the squat patch of yard, while the dog, like a silvery spirograph, cuts teardrop loops across the corner, her feet hammering the weary lawn, her breath illuminating the rhythm. The boy is on the bench, the little girl in my arms, and the dog turns oval after oval. We forget to count how many times. Never have the children witnessed such abandon as this greyhound, this machine of muscle and spirit, ferries in her DNA. They laugh for all the joy of it, for the bass beat of paws on hard earth, pounding in their chests, for the terror of such reckless pleasure. This next one also has a somewhat celebratory feel to it. It's called Still Waters. When I leave the lagoon, I know I've witnessed something divine, because in my mind I repeat over and over, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Below, in the reeds, an egret, white and serene as a feathered angel. Resting on the half-submerged branch of a fallen tree, a cormorant. And a turtle, a corrugated halo of tranquility, mere feet from the bank where my feet are planted, meets my gaze before slipping from view, like a vision slowly fading. Did I really just see that? You can keep your rising from the dead, your 5,000 loaves and fishes. There is wonder enough for me in the slender dagger of an egret's beak, its gold-ringed eye judging me. I used to spend a lot of time when I was still working at the Jackson Park Lagoon. I just loved being around the water, and I'm going to stick with the water theme for a few poems. This next one was written last year, before the pandemic, while I was volunteering for a group called Urban Rivers. And part of what they do is they put up little floating islands so that water creatures like ducks and otters have a place to go, because the walls are so high there that they can't get out of the river otherwise. And part of what I did was go around in a kayak and pick up garbage that I saw, and I also helped water the plants on the islands. And this is a poem written about that time. It's called River Creatures. Perhaps as the sleek yellow body of my kayak glides through the river's murk, the plastic wings of my paddles churning air and water, perhaps the heron and turtle that eye me from the shallows of the square-cornered North Avenue turning basin think I am one of them, a denizen of Chicago's river and its North Branch Canal, some large duck or flamboyant water spider or surface-skimming dragonfly, for they do not decamp the lick-clean logs jutting from the silty bottom as I approach. Though they do, to be fair, keep an eye on me. The turtle with his neck outstretched to make a third tine on the base of the fork where he rests. The heron bending his neck until it forms another oculus beside the amber one in his slender blue-gray head. I bob a few more minutes on the wind-churned water as the three of us continue to appreciate one another, then turn my nose away to leave them to their sunning. This next one also starts out on the river. It has an epigraph from Peter Frederici, which reads, "Just to list the common names of mussels is to speak a sort of vernacular poetry." This poem is called Naming the World. How I wish I'd been around when the world was new and everything needed names. Now there are only puppies, lipstick shades, and babies needing labels. Even Marianne Moore, more than 3 score my senior, had nothing but cars to christen. Mongoose Civique, Turco Tingo, an intelligent whale, not one of which it seems was what others beheld on the drawing table. Where she saw domed roofs and slinky low profiles, someone else recognized the Edsel. It would be a mistake to think the early Verbarian at a disadvantage, with no desk, no pencil, no well-worn thesaurus, with no more than an apron full of words. Every man in those days was turned into a poet by a world so saturated with metaphor, you had only to look at one thing to see in it another. The secretive smirks of mussels in their riverbed, for instance, told another outcome for the ark. There, at river bottom, elephant ear, butterfly and sheep nose, monkey face, fawn's foot, elk and deer and pig toe, the ones that never made it to the shore. A litany of mussels tallies like pawn shop or junk drawer inventory, pistol grips, washboards, pocketbooks, plain and fat, spectacle case, rabbit's foot, and snuff box. So much depends on who saw what, when. The warty backs, fat muckets, and pimplebacks burdened through all the centuries with someone's bad aesthetic day. What foot first called out heel splitter as it found that horny shell? And one can only suppose the face that gave refuge to that mollusk of an orb, Higgins' eye. Remind me never to fraternize with Higgins. And if the paper shell, pink or fragile or cylindrical, conjures something fine and gorgeous, who am I to argue with that namer's vision? And we haven't left the river yet. Think of the bird's foot violet lightly hopping the prairie, the walking stick outstrolling the forest, the mourning dove grieving its miserable name. What a fever of designation there must have been when fox and holly and dragonfly were cloaked yet in anonymity. But for all the species nestled snug in their taxa, a clutter still remains incognito. Just last month, a squid tall as a giraffe was spied, with fins like wings, arms like spider webs, and so far unmonikered, the John Doe of cephalopods. and here is my chance. The orchid petal squid, I want to suggest. The Dulcinea, fallen angel, ivory ascot, flying Dutchman, or hoary mantle squid. But the world is not so fresh now as when we first assigned identity. And common names, uncommonly plump ones with meaning, showcase now only shrinking imagination, like whale falls stripped to skeletons by creatures we'd surely know as streamer or hula girl worms, were they discovered before the July before last. But in a language picked clean, all a dying whale's future holds is being groomed by bone-eating worms. I'm going to grab a quick drink of water here. And now we're moving from river to lake. This poem is based on a photograph that I much have loved and is sitting in my study. It's called Cleaning Fish, Post Lake, July 1941. I always thought the photo of my grandfather and his brother with the scarred wooden table between them, on which they are gutting fish, was about them, about the scarred woman that came between them. But realize now the photo is about my mother, whose arms are no wider than the perch her uncle takes a knife to, whose eyes are level with the metal tub on the table where the men throw the entrails, her overalls hanging loosely on her small frame, her shoes invisible in the duff of leaves and pine needles, a froth of curls around the tip cup of her face. Who isn't afraid of the knives, the blood, the slick viscera, the bright rain of fish scales? Who isn't afraid to look at death? And having read one poem about my mother, I thought I would read another, this one about my childhood. It's called Little Moon. All the years of my childhood, I'd stand between my young mother and the shelves of 1921 Encyclopedia Britannicas, the moldering National Geographics behind the rocking recliner with its wildly floral cover, stand above the little bald spot at the dead end of the sagittal suture, where the Tamar Peninsula would be if her forehead were Canada, her eyebrows the US border. A nickel of nearly hairless flesh marked the cysts she'd had as a baby, scorched away with dry ice. All the way home in the buggy she screamed, my grandmother loved to say, affronted by the incivility of that din. But in the dimly lit living room of my grade school years, I only remember the quiet as I'd stand there above that smooth ring of flesh, white as a full moon in the dark heaven of her hair, and pluck away the stray grays to keep her youthful. Only now is it clear, nearly 20 years after losing her, that of all the silver straws I drew, every one of them was the short one. And I had been planning to read this next poem anyway, but I saw that my good friend Mary Nell had requested it, so that makes it even more of a pleasure to read it. This poem is one of the few political poems I've written, although to read it, you wouldn't know that it's overtly political. It was written in response to the 2016 election. And unfortunately, it still holds true and probably could easily be applied to the pandemic. And I think also to what has been happening after Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death and so many other things. It's based on a Bible verse. It's called For Want of 10 Righteous Persons. We are all Lot's wife now, nameless and aimless, forced to leave behind what we thought we always knew, holding our dear ones closer, yearning for that one last look at a landscape we'd grown to love before it's transformed to smoke and ash, unrecognizable as we are to one another. We are immobilized, brittle, common, sharp-edged, corrosive, vulnerable to fogs and squalls and floods, and even our own tears. From looking at many of the names that have popped up of attendees, probably most of you know this already, but just in case there are people who don't, I had kind of a rough summer with a couple of hospital stays and ultimately ending in a cancer diagnosis. However, they caught it very early. I do have to go through chemo, but the prognosis is very good. But I've been dealing with that the way I deal with most things in my life, which is by writing poetry. And this next poem is actually about my first chemo treatment, which was about 3 weeks ago. It's called Sacred Space. 1. In the church I am making of Cretico's Cancer Center, I am in my purple pew, my face as I recline my solitary bench, lifting toward heaven, wood-slatted and perfectly pleasant, my hands at my side, upturned and open as eager collection baskets. 2. Like any late-night reveler compelled to an early service, I may doze now and again, though I haven't been a reveler now for nearly the number of years as Christ roamed our mortal marble. 3. Between unextraordinary slumbers, I watch a man find salvation on my small screen, from a Zen octopus in a forest of quivering kelp. The miracle of wonder has tentacles everywhere. 4. Embedded in my chest, a portal smaller than a communion wafer, accepts the sacrament of chemo from the altar of science. Much as Jesus was changed to a bit of brittle bread, my own known body is transforming into some kind of mystic other. 5. All around me, a choir of the faithful confess their fears, their flaws, their habits, to their guardian nurses, those shepherds of survival. And though each of us are in our own boxes, the voices mingle, and there's a kind of congregation in that. 6. Despite the hovering specter of malady, peace wafts over us like the tired smoke from a swaying, sacred smudge pot. 7. Throughout the hours of my devotion to this baptism by paclitaxel, the nurses flow, murmuring river-like, from patient to patient, task to task, flow sweet and blessed as holy water. I kind of read those in backwards. This next one actually probably should have preceded that one, but that's okay. This is about when I first got my medical port, which for those of you who don't know is a little thing implanted in my chest that allows them to avoid putting needles in my arm constantly. So it's a good thing. This is called Salt. You've seen the pictures, rows of beds or reclining chairs, men and women covered in blankets, some wearing hats, pillows like snowdrifts cushioning their heads, the fresh air believed to cure lungs squeezed by disease. Lying at present in my own lounge chair in my own yard, I feel a kinship with those invalids, soaking in the mountain or desert or sea air. A blanket wrapped around me, feet to chin. It's 79 degrees out, but I'm in the shade, and there's a breeze, and the incision under the white pillow of gauze adrift on my chest is aching. Whatever quietive juice they pumped into my arm, floating away. I have a port now, and imagine weary sailors too many days afloat on an ocean, readying to dock at the jetty jutting from my rib cage. I smile, warming to the sense of welcoming I feel, as if I'm someone's homecoming, a safe harbor, a whiff of soil, pine, and home cooking, a chance to wash away the salt from so long at sea. I want to read one more from this little series of, for lack of a better word, cancer poems. This is called Borrowing Faith. Someone else's faith hangs around my neck, a miraculous medal, the Virgin Mary with rays of grace radiating from her hands, rests at the crossroads of my clavicles, the little V, the arrow facing my heart. I am not devout, but like any student of literature, I know the value of a symbol. How many times has the friend who gifted it beat back cancer? I've honestly lost count. Her own miraculous medal glows like a small sun on the freckled cosmos of her chest. No more pious than I am, she chanced upon it in France, which freighted it with fate. Who dismisses an offering of such luck? It warms her to feel it lightly alighting like a softly whispered prayer at the apex of her sternum, that guardian of her life. You will have the grace to do what is necessary, Sister Catherine said to have heard Mary say, and grace is what's been given to me, floating on a fine silver chain like a tiny shield, protecting me as I journey back to health. And I wanted to close on a hopeful note about new beginnings for myself and for all of us. This is called Into the Opening. Going where the dogs' noses take us, through the little woods to the old racetrack this very particular morning in June. The asphalt oval giving way to wildness, green pushing up through every crevice and into this time before the world rises. Beyond, I let the grass run its fingers over the naked back of my foot. The dogs and I are drenched now with dew and birdsong. The dogs linger near the sling bottom swings, near the valley carved in the sand by hundreds of dangled feet. They were on some scent, noses sorting the breeze, but beguiled by grass, they stopped to sample the lushness, and at such an unlikely place, crouched beneath the framework of play, alongside familiar paws, 2 strawberries glanced beneath leaves. I picked them, red but small as peas, let them roll onto my tongue. The grass is delicious to the dogs in its abundance. The strawberries delicious in their sweet surprise. The light also delicious, buttery, soft, generous. And now the loose minutes scatter like stones at our feet as we walk back across the park, through the woods, and into the opening of the day. Thank you again to everybody for being here. I think there's time for questions, but I'm not quite sure how that's going to work since I can't hear Linda. Oh, we're doing it on the phone, so maybe that'll work. Okay.
Okay. Okay. You know, there just are not enough devices in the world for us, are there? That was a beautiful reading.
Thank you.
So to avoid a lot of echoing, I want to make sure I tell people that there is a buy the book button right at the bottom of your screen, and you can click that at any time and buy this wonderful book, Kissing the Long Face of the Greyhound. I want to ask Yvonne a few questions. First of all, that wonderful poem, Naming the World. I don't know if I have a favorite, but that is one of my favorites in the book. And I've read it 3 times. Are those really, all those names you give, are those really the names of muscles?
Yeah, those are the names of mussels. This was one of the poems that I got from a book I edited, the natural history of the Chicago region. And one of the things he talks about is what Chicago, this is a large part of the book, what Chicago was like before it was developed by people. And he talks about how many species of mussels there were in the rivers. And I was just blown away by the names of these mussels. And like the epigraph said, just to list their vernacular names is a kind of poetry. I mean, there was just so much beauty there. And you wonder how people came up with these names. You know, you look at some of these mussels and you think, that is not a pretty thing, and yet it has this beautiful name. So I just felt compelled to write about it.
Well, I think it, can you hear me? I think it reminds me of the power of poetry, because, you know, I'm 100 years old, and I didn't know.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you, Linda.
I said, I'm 100 years old, and I've never heard that. I mean, that's something brand new that you made me see, that I'll have forever. I'll have those beautiful words forever. And I would have never known that. I just would have never found that. And I read all the time.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful poem. I also really like the one Mary Nell likes, the For Want of 10 Righteous Persons. Tell me where that title comes from.
The title is actually taken from an Old Testament verse that has to do with Lot's wife. And it was, they couldn't find 10 righteous people in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and so that's why the cities were destroyed. And then, of course, as we all know, Lot's wife could not resist looking back and turned into a pillar of salt.
Right.
So.
Oops. Shoot.
Nope.
Shoot. I just. Okay, wait a second.
Okay. Next question.
I was trying to unmute myself and I hung up. Oh, I guess I want you to read another poem.
Okay.
I want you to read the one at the end of the book. The Wild Indigo.
Okay, let me find that quickly.
It's the last one.
Book. I haven't been reading from the book because it's distracting to flip back and forth in the pages, but I know exactly where this poem is. So, this poem has a line that's borrowed from a book called Indigo, In Search of the Color That Seduced the World, by an author named Catherine McKinley. You won't be able to tell that it's there because you're not looking at it, but know that there is a line that I did not write. I guess I can tell you what it is, which was, when it comes up, was more powerful than the gun. This is called Blue Wild Indigo. I have long admired their dark oval bodies, swaying like chow tongues in the breeze. Yet for all the pod's deep bruise of color, it's the plant's modest green elliptical leaves, with their secret concentration of indican, tryptophan's less sleepy cousin, that yield the dye prized once by shamans, slavers, rag traders, and kings, the powder that was more powerful than the gun, that was worth, in a length of cloth, a human body. It's the pod's interior, though, that's the real marvel to me. Seeds lined up like piglets at suckle, like rowers in a skull, like socks in a gentleman's drawer, like footlights glowing against the pod's black backdrop, ready to illuminate the next stage of their cycle, heroes of their own story. The two halves of a pod rest side by side on my desk, like pages of an open book about some captives making their escape in two rough-hewn boats. Thank you.
And again, shows me something I've looked at before but never seen until you showed it to me that way. So I hear there's some very good news in your life. You will never stop writing poetry. They come so thick and fast.
Yes, I'm a little on the prolific side.
But and they're wonderful. And if it were up to me, I'd have you write nothing but poetry. However, you started working on a lesbian historical novel 20 years ago, maybe?
Probably, maybe longer. I really lost track of time.
So tell us the good news.
I just found out on Sunday that a small LGBTQ publisher called Rattling Good Yarns is going to publish my my lesbian historical novel set in late 19th century Russia. It is not an easy book to place. There were a number of publishers who really liked it, but said we wouldn't know how to market it. It doesn't fit in with our other books. They just were a little confused about what to do with it. And I've had probably a good 24 rejections for it, and likely would have given up trying, except that the comments about it that they made, the people who rejected it, were always so positive and glowing. So I knew it wasn't because the writing was bad. I just had to find somebody who would fall in love with it and know what to do with it. And actually, the University of Alaska Press had expressed interest in it. One of the editors there wanted to take it to their editorial board this fall, probably about now. And then the coronavirus hit, and Alaska's tourism business bottomed out. And that meant no money was coming in for state organizations, including the press. So I got a note from the editor saying, we're not taking any new projects forward for a year. So it wasn't, she said, I hope you'll stay with the University of Alaska Press. I think my battery's getting low on my computer now, so that's just lovely. Let's get everything bad going on in here. And so it wasn't a rejection, but they hadn't accepted it either. So I started sending it out to places again, and was not hopeful. But this Rattling Good Yarns Press is going to publish it, and they seem to really like it, and I couldn't be happier. So it should come out sometime this spring.
That's very exciting. And those of us who have loved your essays and your columns over the years are in for a whole new kind of treat in this. I read an early version of it. You've probably changed it a lot since, but I'm really looking forward to the finished book. Thanks so much for everything you do. You know, Yvonne has done so much for this community. You probably don't even know, but she helped create all the skits we did at Women and Children First to celebrate our birthdays. She, you know, the poetry machine is something that I have been so delighted to see children drawn to it. And at first we would say, you know, it's not candy in those little, and they'd say, no, it's a poem. I want to read a new poem. I mean, who knew that would be such an inspiration for children? So thanks for that, too. Why don't you, before your battery goes down, have we got any questions? Everybody's just wonderful, giving you wonderful compliments. And I want to remind everybody, too, that you can watch this later.
I'm just looking to see what the questions were.
Oh, here's a question. We would like to know where the turtles were sunning themselves.
That was at Jackson Park Lagoon. Do you want me to read that poem? I probably would have to move to where I can plug in my computer, so that'll be a little disruptive.
Wait a minute, I can find it.
You want to read it?
Sure.
Yeah, why don't you read it, Linda? And I'm going to move to where I can plug in, and you'll get to see parts of my living room as I move around here.
Let's see, I want to make sure I put my phone on mute so you don't hear it twice. The turtles are sunning themselves, lined up like dinner plates along a server's arm on the log reaching up from the lagoon's shallows. But the sliders slip from their sodden perch into the drink the minute they sense me on the crumbling path ringing the pond. I wait a while because they're worth waiting for, hoping they'll resurface if only I'm still as a stump. But they come by their wariness naturally and watch me from a distance, their necks extended like periscopes above the water's murk. I think what I admire is their naked admission that our bodies are too soft for the dangers of this world. I stand there a while longer, ringed in shadow by the noon sun, watching the blurred boats of their bodies move languidly beneath the surface like dark thoughts. It's a great poem.
Thank you, Linda.
Well, are you satisfied, Miss Yvonne? Would you like to read one more poem? Do you have anything else you'd like to leave us with? Oh, you can't hear me. So I was saying, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Boy. You mean another poem?
Sure.
Well, we've just kind of been dealing with a comedy of technical errors here, so I think we're doing pretty well altogether.
All right.
I guess we could call it.
Yeah,
It's getting.
we could call it. Do buy the book. Either come in the store and buy it, or press the button and buy it this way, or pick it up. Thanks for your attention tonight. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, which I am completely powerless to solve. But I loved hearing you read, and I love this new book. I think it has the best cover of any of your previous books. It's so lovely. You can see it behind me. So thanks, Yvonne. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight. And have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.